Hi, welcome everybody to the Local Innovator Series, which is hosted by Prismatik and supported by the City of Sydney. My name is Christie Whitehill and I am the CEO and founder of Tech Ready Women. And I'm here today with Adam Jacobs, who is the co-founder of Hatch and The Iconic. So we have a really great session that we're going to get into where we're going to ask Adam lots of questions about his journey into entrepreneurship, his journey with The Iconic and also Hatch. And so if you have any questions, please do ask them throughout the session. But I would first like to say we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging. And I'd like to say a big thank you to Laneway Education for hosting us here today, and also to the City of Sydney for supporting this series. Here's just a special message from Councillor Jess Scully, who recorded this especially for you.
Thank you, Christy. It's great to be here and to welcome you to the first event in the Local Innovator Series. I want to start by acknowledging that I'm coming to you from Gadigal land and to pay my respects to elders past and present of the Eora Nation. I also want to acknowledge the great diversity of Sydney. This is a place that is home to over 200 different cultures. People from all over the world have made Sydney their home, and it's one of our greatest strengths, a deep well that we can draw from, of global connection, of global storytelling and different perspectives and practices, something that is essential, I think, for people who make work that is about creativity, communication and connection. We've got to value and prioritise and elevate that diversity that makes Sydney so special. A very special welcome to our guest today, Adam Jacobs. He's the co-founder of Hatch and The Iconic. And look, very few of us don't know The Iconic. Since it was founded in 2011, it has become Australia's largest online fashion retailer. And growing from there, Adam has gone on to found Hatch, an organisation that's dedicated to helping students find meaningful work while they study. Today's event also actually originated in another event that the City of Sydney supported. It originated from the Innovation Game event that Prismatik held during Spark Festival last year. And I'm sure many of you would know Spark Festival. It's always a fantastic event. I'm very glad the city supports Spark. And I'm also glad that Spark is going to continue in an online format in October this year. So I hope that you're able to join us for Spark Festival as well. Prismatik have worked with the city on a number of other events. This event in particular was supported through a knowledge exchange grant. So if you have an idea that you think would help bring people together and share knowledge, please get in touch with us at the City of Sydney and you can find out more about how you could take advantage of the knowledge exchange grant as well. As you'd know, look, we put on events that are all about supporting our community, and supporting our tech and startup and innovation community is one of our key areas of focus through our Tech Startups Action Plan and through the work we do on local economic development. We have held events that have catered to about 6,500 of our local startup and innovator community. So I'm sure this isn't the first one of our events that you've been to. You might have also attended one of our Visiting Entrepreneur Program events. These are events that are about bringing the best talent in the world to Sydney, whether virtually or in real life, and connecting them with the talent that we have here. But I'm really excited to see now that we're really reaching into the great network and the ecosystem that we have here to draw on the experiences of people like Adam through this Local Innovator Series. You know, everything is a bit more difficult and we're all a little bit more isolated now. So I hope that you're able to draw on events like this one to connect with people in the ecosystem. Please reach out beyond this event, get in touch with people. go on LinkedIn and connect with the people that you hear from today. Look at the attendees when you can connect potentially with other participants and try and reach out to people whose experience might resonate with you. We've all got to go and try a little bit harder to build connections and networks at a time like this. And going to events and sharing events like this one is one way to do that. So I hope you're able to draw some inspiration and connection from today's events. And I look forward to seeing what you bring to the city in the coming years.
Thank you, Councillor Jess Scully. Really appreciate that. Guys, as I mentioned, if you have any questions throughout the session, we're going to jump into our questions now. You can go to Slido, is it .com.au? .com. /Prismatik. There we go. So if you've got any questions, definitely pop them in and we will get to them throughout the chat. Adam.
Christie.
How you going?
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, very exciting. And I love the set they've done. It's very wonderful. Thanks.
It's very comfy. I
Thanks,
have some
Prismatik.
Melbourne breakfast tea on standby right here.
Beautiful.
Feeling good.
Yeah. And you've come from work today?
Came from work.
Yeah. You're working in the office at the moment?
We have been doing 1 day a week in the office. And from next week, we're stepping that up to 3 days a week. It's a small team. It's about 18 people. We've got quite a bit of space so we can distance, but people are loving being back in person again.
Yeah.
After, being so long just at home.
I know. Like, how long has it been now? It's been quite a while, hasn't it? So
yeah. Well, for us, we actually moved into an office on the 15th of March, a new office that was bigger because we were growing the team. And on the 16th of March, we had to close it down. So we literally had like 1 day in it, and it's this gorgeous space. And I think we had maybe 3 months at home. So we're excited to be able to use it again.
Yeah, I think that's probably a lot of, happened to a lot of businesses at the moment. So, but let's jump into finding a little bit about you, your story. I think a really interesting place to start is right at that beginning moment, your background before you were in consulting. So you're in the corporate world and then transitioning into entrepreneurship and starting the Iconic.
Yeah.
Let's start around there because I think that's a really interesting place to start and probably where a lot of entrepreneurs start.
Sure. So I never intended to be an entrepreneur, and to be honest, I still don't identify with the word or with the label of an entrepreneur. It's really something that happened like almost by accident for me. And I guess the story is that I was working in strategy consulting for about 4 or 5 years. First at PwC and then at BCG, and I think like most people who are in strategy consulting, I was there because I just didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. It's a bit of a catch-all for people who aren't quite sure what they want to do, but they're just interested in a bunch of stuff and they want to sort of work in different areas and work with different people. Before coming into the work world, I would have considered myself a socialist or a philosopher, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, I studied philosophy at uni. Yeah. I was fascinated by left-leaning political systems. I traveled a lot, and that was just kind of who I was. Mm-hmm. And so with BCG, when I was consulting, I transferred after a year to Denmark because why not? I mean, Scandinavia is just incredible. Yeah. And was living in Copenhagen and just happened to meet some German investors, some German venture capitalists. And at the time I was doing a bit of consulting in the retail space. I was acutely aware of the difference in e-commerce between Europe and Australia, having come from Australia and moved to Northern Europe. There was probably about a 5-year gap in terms of the maturity of e-commerce. Yeah. Of course, Europe being 5 years ahead. Yep. And wasn't planning to do anything about it, was just sort of noticing it. And happened to be at an event with these German investors and happened to start talking to them about the difference in the retail space between Australia and Europe. Yeah. And they said, you know what, we actually invest into e-commerce. We have a change thesis on we have an investment thesis on growing e-commerce markets. We think Australia is one of them. We think it's got the opportunity to really grow, but no one's really doing much about it. Do you want to talk about it? Yeah. So I found myself in this unplanned conversation with these German billionaires. And
as you do.
Just and they and very quickly they said, look, we want to invest into the sector. Why don't you quit your job and move back to Australia and start an e-commerce company, and we'll give you the funding for it, and let's work together. And I was a bit taken aback about this. I was like,
that just sounds like every entrepreneur's dream. Hey, we'll give you money for a business idea.
But you know, to situate you in my life at the time, so I just left Australia 3 months earlier to move to Copenhagen. My mindset was I'm going to be in Europe for 2 or 3 years with BCG. I'm going to go and do an MBA that would be sponsored by them, and then I'll continue to live elsewhere, South America or America, somewhere fun. I told all my friends I wasn't coming back for 10 years. I sold all my stuff. I broke up with my girlfriend of 2 years. It was like I'm detaching from life in Australia and I'm going to Europe. And had no plans to start a business or to return. So, when that discussion came about with the German investors, my immediate reaction was, this is not my plan. I mean, this is not what I was thinking of doing. And so I said no as a result. And I said no 2 or 3 times to them. And they just kept like bringing it up. And like every week I'd get a call from this senior German venture capitalist being like, yeah, come on, Adam, yeah, why don't you move back to Australia, yeah? And like really putting on the hard word.
Yeah.
And this went on for like 3 months when I was trying to just focus on being in Europe and establishing myself in the BCG system over there. And eventually this guy, his name's Oliver Samwer, a lot of people may have read about him, a really sort of notorious German venture capitalist. He said, look, why don't you fly to Munich and let's have lunch and let's just talk about it face to face. And so I said, okay, fine. And so I headed over to Munich and he was in this beautiful old schnitzel house. I think he rented out the entire place because it was empty except for him. And we sat down in this table, just the 2 of us, in this empty restaurant and talked for like 3 hours. And by the end of the 3 hours, I was all like, you know what? He might be a little crazy and persistent, but is very smart, has the right investment thesis. I agree on the opportunity. I'm going to do it. Like I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to move back to Australia, and I'm going to start a business.
Cool.
And that was a really hard decision point for me. Like I spent weeks angsting over it, like just walking around the canals in Copenhagen, trying to decide, what was the right call. And in the end, on reflection, I think what I learned was, even though it wasn't the right time for me in my life, it was very much the right opportunity. And people often say, you know what, like opportunities, they always come around. And I'm not sure that's true.
No, that sounds like a pretty good one.
Yeah, when there's a great opportunity in front of you and you have the capacity to go for it, go for it.
Yeah.
Even if it means putting a bit of risk on the line. That was my mindset. And so, I had these crazy long pros and cons lists over like stay at BCG, do an MBA, live in Europe, or like quit BCG, move back to Australia, start a business. Yeah. And in the end, the pros and cons didn't help me out. But what did help me out was just a gut feeling of when I wake up in the morning, what am I really excited to do with my life?
Yeah.
Wow, I'd love to build a business. So let's just give it a shot. And that's where the founding story came from.
And that's like really, I guess, important point too, especially right now, because I think a lot of people are, going, well, maybe they've lost their job or their business has gone down or something like that. So, trusting your gut and really looking within when you're trying to make big decisions in your life and what you should be doing and going, what would I really love to do? So I love that. That's a really great point.
I think so. There's this old analogy of careers being like a ladder, which I really reject. I think that a career is much more like a maze.
Yeah.
You can't plan it out so systematically. All you can really do is look at the opportunity in front of you and decide if you want to go left or right.
Yeah.
And decide with your gut, with your instinct.
Yeah.
And if you make enough of those decisions left or right in a row, then you start making good headway through the maze.
And so you had a co-founder for the Iconic. How did that all come about, in terms of forming the team?
So it was 4 of us.
Yeah, 4 of us.
All from BCG. So we all had worked together. So basically what happened was at that point of agreement with the investors of like, yes, we're going to do that. We're going to do it. The next question was, okay, well, let's get together a founding team.
Yeah.
And so 4 of us who'd worked together at BCG came together around it. And 2 of them were European from Germany. 2 were Australian, including myself. And we were all in different places in the world at the time. I was in Copenhagen. One was in Berlin, one was in Melbourne, one was in Sydney.
Right.
And it took us a couple of months to sort of pack up from our respective locations and all get together in Sydney. But
So this is all before actually like starting it, or
Yeah,
were you
this is-
starting it all at the same time?
so at the same, so it started.
Yeah, okay.
Once we'd made the agreement,
Yeah.
we said, okay, well, let's also start putting in motion the business. So the one who was on the ground in Sydney, we started putting together a initial team.
Yeah.
Finding a first office, starting to put together an initial website.
Yeah.
And eventually we were all on the ground by, so this process started in August 2011 and we were all on the ground by November
Yeah, okay.
2000. So I think I started October and the rest of them were there by the end of November.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what were some of the challenges then? Like even though you had this funding, put together for co-founders,
Yeah.
what were some of the challenges and key takeaways that I guess, for first-time entrepreneurs, what were some of the lessons?
Lots.
Yeah.
I mean, so one of the big challenges for us, which is potentially contextual to 2011, was e-commerce was really new for Australia. And so we had a job to do to create belief within the Australian ecosystem, effectively retail ecosystem, that e-commerce was a positive thing.
Yeah.
It was actually viewed as a really negative thing.
And what
at
was
the time.
around then, like in terms of,
Catch of the day, Deals Direct.
So like deals, yeah.
Yeah, all deals, all deal sites, eBay, so, Graze Online. So that, the prevailing paradigm of e-commerce in 2011 was you buy online for a bargain.
Yeah.
It's going to be half price. It's last year's stock. It's probably going to be delivered in a month. If it's wrong, you can't send it back. There's no customer service, but hey, it's half price. That's sort of that's a paradigm. And we wanted to be almost the vanguards of a second wave of e-commerce that wasn't oriented around a price point, but it was oriented around a service standard. And our message was e-commerce is a better experience. Instead of having to spend hours in car parks and busy shopping centres and end up not finding the size you wanted in the first place, you can just browse on your phone at lunchtime, have it delivered, get it that afternoon.
Yeah.
If you've got a problem, call us straight away. It's all really local, it's all really easy and fast. So the first big job was making people believe in that, and in particular making brands, like fashion brands, believe. Because as a retailer, you're only as strong as the brands that you offer.
Yeah.
And brands are very selective as to who they partner with. Yeah. So that was a big challenge. And also, another big challenge for us was talent. In 2011, not many Australians had experience in e-commerce. So, questions like how do you set up the right digital marketing funnel? How do you build an efficient site? How do you set up warehousing operations? They might sound pretty run-of-the-mill in 2020. In 2011, like no one knew.
Yeah.
So we had to import a lot of talent from overseas. We had to spend time with other e-commerce businesses in other regions to understand how they were doing things. We had to bring a lot of that knowledge into Australia and build it. And I'm proud to say a lot of people who worked at The Iconic have now taken it to lots of other parts of the Australian ecosystem and continued that knowledge growth.
Yeah, no, that's it's really interesting. Like even getting all that funding initially, how much. It doesn't really take away the problems because it's all still the same.
Yeah, I mean, funding's super helpful.
It's
helpful.
helpful,
It obviously, but you still got to execute.
Yeah.
And there were plenty of e-commerce businesses who started around the same time with funding and didn't survive, because they bought the wrong stock. They weren't able to figure out how to market properly. They got the operations wrong and they're really expensive. I mean, we made a lot of mistakes, don't get me wrong. I mean, we could spend this whole time just on the mistakes that we made. I could mention a couple if you wanted, but I think what we were good at was expecting to make mistakes and being super humble about like just calling them out, being like, wow, we were wrong about that. And then just immediately iterating and changing. I used to say to our team at the time that a bad decision on Monday was better than a good decision on Friday. So like, let's not be afraid to make a call and measure it. And if it's wrong, great, we've learned something, like let's change. Yeah. We got super good at that.
Yeah, cool.
And I think that differentiated us from a lot of others. The other thing I'd say to your question about what were some of the challenges was the structure of our founder relationships. And it's like it's a tricky area for anyone starting a business. Founder relationship is is like a marriage. You know, there's so much trust and you rely so much on each other. And we had great relationships between the four of us, worked really well from a personal perspective. But in hindsight, I think the way we set it up, where we had 4 equal founders as opposed to one CEO, was problematic. It wasn't problematic in the first year when there was just so much to do, because we basically divided and conquered. We each 4 had different responsibilities. But into the second year, it meant that we were all really focused on what was happening in our corners and our responsibilities. But there wasn't one person with the ultimate accountability to make sure it hung together, that there was like strategic integrity of the whole. And that's not a power play. It's not like someone's more important or has more authority. It has to be someone's job to look at the whole thing and be like, does this all make sense together? And I would have changed that. I mean, in the end, the other 3 founders were all only there for the first 1 to 2 years. I was the only founder that stayed all the way through until about a year and a half ago. But going back, I'd probably, if there was 4 of us, I think it works with 2.
That's what I was going to say. 4's,
four's a lot.
It's a lot, a lot. Like even, I mean, 3's good, but I mean, 2's I feel is like a sweet spot as well.
We have 2 in my newer business. Hatch with Chaz, my co-founder, and we're both co-CEOs, and that actually works really well because there's only 2 of us, and we can almost both play that overarching role of thinking about the whole business.
And especially if you've got complementary skill sets and can see it from different perspectives. That's what the other question I was going to ask about co-CEO. Do you have any advice around that in terms of what you guys do day to day, and how that works?
Well, the way we structure it for Hatch is we have clear areas of responsibility, and broadly between myself and Chaz, and we can talk about the Hatch business model in a bit to explain it, but it's a digital platform that connects young people to work. And broadly, the way we divide our responsibilities is I handle what we call front of house, which is our customer experience, our marketing, our technology, everything to do with effectively the way the product comes to life. And Chaz handles everything back of house, which is our operations, our financing, our legal, a lot of our team operations. One of the things we do at Hatch is we often play the role of being the legal employer for a young person who's placed with an organisation to take away all the employment admin and headache from that organisation. So we do contracting, and we do that as a technology company. We try and make it really scalable. So there's a whole lot of stuff there around labour hire operations that is back at house that Chaz looks after. So we have clear areas of responsibility, but then we regularly come together and we ask ourselves more holistic questions about the top level company status and strategy and progress. And we employ what we call a 4-eyed principle, where both sets of eyes looking at those really critical questions and decisions, and therefore adding different perspectives and help us to avoid making a silly call if only you just talked to someone else and they would have told you. That doesn't sound right at all. Like the 4-eyed principle really makes a big difference there.
Well, we'll get on to Hatch in a little bit more, because that's really interesting how you've founded that business now as well. But just back to the Iconic and talking about, I guess, when you started scaling the team, was there any lessons you learned around that in terms of, once you started going, okay, yes, this is really going to start taking off? What did you do in terms of your strategy? And do you have any advice on that?
Lots.
And building the culture, I think, is a really important part too.
Yeah, totally. So maybe I'll point out three lessons in hindsight that were really apparent to me in retrospect towards the Iconic success, or really, I suppose, really instrumental towards its success. The first is, from a very early stage, the Iconic was naturally quite values oriented, and a lot of businesses talk about their values and talk about the importance of them, but I would say a lot of businesses pay lip service to their values. It's more rhetoric, and then you get into the actual heart of the operation, and people don't behave in alignment to the values. At the Iconic, we actually didn't write the values down on paper for about 2.5 years. And by the time we did, it was easy to do so because they were lived, and they came from mostly the personality of the founders. And the first set of values that the Iconic had, they've sort of evolved a little bit, but the first set were 4. Let's make sure I can remember them. One was putting customers first, so really heroing customer centricity and standing for a superior shopping experience no matter what. The second we called Stronger Together, which was about how we invested into the team and in particular collaboration and cross-functional working. The third was we get things done, which was pragmatism. So, not spending weeks on a decision, over analyzing, but like bias to action. And the fourth was we dream big, which was having a sense of aspiration, not being afraid to disrupt the status quo. Not being afraid to say, we know no one's done this before, but that doesn't mean we can't do it. We're actually going to go for it. Something like 3-hour delivery at scale. And those values legitimately came through how the business operated. So when we recruited people, we would test for those values in how they behaved in their previous roles. When we celebrated things, we would provide stories in alignment with those values, either customer interactions or people doing things internally. When we eventually set up bonus schemes, we put bonuses against those values. When we measure the business in terms of KPIs, those KPIs would talk to those values. They were very much instilled in the fabric of how things worked. And I think that is fundamental. If you don't know what you stand for as a business, you're not going anywhere. Because all you're doing is reacting to the whims of the external world. A business that is starting out and is building needs to take a position. It needs to say, this is what we believe in and this is what we're working towards. And yes, we'll adjust as we learn things along the way, but we're not going to do 180-degree flips every time we learn something new. And for us at The Iconic, the values provided that North Star. So that was fundamental. That's the first thing. The second thing in terms of, what did I learn that made a big difference at The Iconic around culture was our move towards cross-functional collaboration and working. When we started off, particularly in the technology space, we had this classic problem of teams not talking to each other. So marketing would come up with an idea, they'd tell product would write it down, they'd then give it to engineering would build it, but somewhere along that chain, like the idea that was conceived looked nothing like the idea that was built. And everybody was frustrated. Marketing was all like, well, that wasn't our idea, and products like, all we're doing is just writing things down, and engineering's like, we didn't even know what you meant in the first place. It just didn't work. And so we shifted towards effectively the Spotify-inspired model of squads, of cross-functional teams. So if you take a problem like you're trying to figure out how to build the algorithm that orders dresses on a page, we would have a cross-functional team of a data scientist, a software engineer, a performance marketer, a fashion buyer, and a content producer. And together they would add different perspectives to that problem. The buyer might look at it from a perspective of what's selling well. The marketer might look at the digital funnel and different indicators of micro conversion rates. The content producer might look at competitors and what they're doing really amazing, we can draw inspiration from. The data scientist might think about how things work in the insurance world and borrow from those ideas into e-commerce. And all of a sudden, you get this solution that is orders of magnitude better than if any one person had tried to work on that problem. So we learned that lesson quite quickly, and that was instrumental to growth and to fueling growth. It sort of meant that leaders such as myself stopped trying to give out solutions and trying to tell people what to do. And instead, my job in particular became identifying the right problems to solve and then just putting these cross-functional teams around those problems and letting them run. Works super well.
That's really good advice, actually, because I think a lot of founders, as their team grows and they're having to pass on that responsibility, because for them they want to free up their time to be able to do the next level, next level, strategy, role, all of that sort of stuff. And then if you can get that working, so that's great advice.
I think the reality is also like there are definitely other people who are going to be better at it than you. And there is a natural instinct to want to maintain control, because your ass is on the line. Like the buck stops with you when you're a founder or a CEO or an MD, and you want to, and you care about it. Like you want to make sure every little thing works. But if you try and maintain that level of control, there's always a ceiling that you'll never move past. And it's so important to instead identify the right people to have on your bus and then empower them and give them control, and the whole organization moves faster.
Yeah.
So that was a really important lesson. I think the third lesson is like what I called for a little while the no wanker policy. There was this period, and this is like a classic high growth startup mistake. There's this period where we like took off and we were doubling the business every month in terms of like revenue. The team went from 100 people to 300 people within 4 months. You know, like 6 months later, it was like 500 people. It was just skyrocketing. We were experiencing hyper growth. And so, you know, what we sort of thought was, wow, like we need to bring in some experience. Like we started with versatile, young, hungry, talented people, but now they're managing huge budgets. They're coming up against like a scale they haven't dealt with before. Like let's bring in some experience. And we started hiring primarily off CVs. You know, this person has phenomenal experience in e-commerce in the States, in brands we trust. Like they've got to be great, let's bring them in. And half of those hires were just wrong for our culture. In many regards, they were there because they wanted the esteem of a career role, like a big title, and now I'm in charge. And they seemed to be often stubborn or empire building, or they sort of, their natural stylistic preference was more authoritarian as opposed to collaborative, which was, you know, very much the Iconics culture. And those hires set us back. They didn't move us forward. You know, they meant that we got stuck in internal debate and people issues and clash of value sets, and they tangled us up. And so, you know, the big learning from that was it's much more important when you're hiring to gain alignment on someone's values and someone's potential and let them grow into the role than it is on finding someone who's demonstrated they've done that exact thing before. You know, so in hiring, we started putting a huge focus on values and transferable strengths. And also we then spent more time on promoting and developing from within, because we already had people who were amazing and we knew were great, and we could sort of continue to develop and increase their responsibility.
Yeah, it's sounds like a really important part in terms of hiring and values. Well, let's move on to Hatch and that transition, or that moment where you were like, okay, I'm finished here at the Iconic and I'm wanting to found something new. Like, did you take time out? Like, what was the story around that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I can trace it back as early as 2015, where I first, maybe it was early 2016, around that time, where I first had a conversation with some of our investors, and they said, look, you know, we'd like to know what your plan is, because we're sort of planning out the next phase of the business. And eventually the parent group, the investment portfolio, listed on the stock exchange in Europe last year. So that was a milestone they were working towards, and they wanted to know what my plans were, and therefore what my role through that IPO milestone might be. And it sort of, that question caused me to just sort of reflect, oh, well, what are my plans? Like, I don't know, this has been, like, I hadn't stopped and taken a breath. You know, that was maybe 5 years in. And I hadn't stopped and taken a breath and thought, well, I've just learnt the most tremendous amount about building businesses, and in particular technology companies. And, you know, at the time I would have been like, I want to say I would have been like 34 or 35 or 30, 33, I don't know, around that, 33, let's say, 34, I think. And so, like, I still felt young. I was like, I think I still feel young now. But,
and I was like, still feel young.
But I think I felt like I was in this unique position of being, being like experienced enough to have this set of skills that were really unique and I could use, but being young enough to still be a bit naive about like chasing something.
Do it again.
Do it again, and like particularly with like a sense of impact, like social impact, like something that was really close to my, like what I might want to contribute to the world. And that was banging around in my mind, and I don't know why, I just remember this really specific moment when I was on a family holiday, and I was like having a walk with my dad, and I was like reflecting on this point, and I remember just at that moment it galvanized in my stomach. I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to regret not starting something again, given I have this opportunity, and starting. And it's not that I wouldn't, you know, I don't love the Iconic. I love that business. There's so much of my heart and soul.
And you're still like a part of it?
Yeah, I still play an advisory role.
Yeah.
So I'm not day-to-day or operational in any capacity, but I still have a relationship to the business.
Yeah.
And you know, would have loved to continue to play a leadership role in the business, but felt I had this unique opportunity to almost build from it, like take all that I learned at the Iconic and use it to lead me to the next thing that was maybe a step closer towards my own sense of social impact. And that in itself was not only a scary decision, but to many people seemed like an insane decision. Because from the outside, it's like, hang on a second, you're in this leadership role of Australia's largest online retailer. It's going incredibly well. It's growing really fast. You're really young, and you want to sort of put that all to the side and start from scratch. Why would you do that? What an amazing business, the Iconic. It was such a great role to be in. And I think really it was nothing more than taking a bit of a leap of faith to pursue a pure sense of purpose. And so the way it worked was I started talking about it with a close friend, Chaz, who eventually became my co-founder. And he's also an entrepreneur, even though I don't call myself an entrepreneur. He was one of the founders of Zip Co. And we'd for a while been talking about building something together. And so what we did was it sounds super cliched, but we jetted off to the Himalayas and we went trekking in Nepal for a month. And we just no phones, just got away from the world. And we asked ourselves the question, what do we want the world to look like in 100 years? And then a week later after talking about that, we asked ourselves the question, what could we do to influence that future? And something we started talking about a lot was work and the role work plays in our lives, and how there's this opportunity for us to use our work lives to do something that's really meaningful to us and to contribute to a world that we care about, and how actually the system of work isn't set up to facilitate that. The system of work mostly narrows us in. You kind of start somewhere when you're young because you just happen to land there, and then you're in a groove and it's hard to change. It's hard to pursue a sense of meaning through your work life.
We don't get taught when we're young, to follow your purpose and your passion. They say it, but it's not really instilled, is it?
Yeah, it's sort of more do something safe, become a doctor, lawyer today. Maybe it's an entrepreneur, I don't know, that's being heroed in society and communities around you, as opposed to look inwards to what you really care about and follow that. I think the other problem, huge problem, is that your social background plays an outsized, an oversized role in what opportunities you have available to you. So, when thinking about it, we decided that was an area we wanted to target. And in particular, we wanted to make it easier for young people who are coming into the workforce for the first time to discover different types of work, try out different types of work, and figure out what's right for them and where they might want to start. So we sort of came out of the Himalayas with that general idea. We then literally, in our hiking boots, got on a plane from Kathmandu to San Francisco, and we spent about 2 or 3 weeks in this would be now late 2016 in the valley, playing around with the idea with the community there, just testing it, getting feedback, validating it, talking to other people in that space, talking to investors, getting their perspective, talking to businesses. We then came back to Sydney. This is sort of now November 2016. I, at the time, was still full-time at the Iconic. I had probably another year from that point to go from full-time to part-time, and another year after that to then move to fully non-operational. Chaz was just about to get married. So there was a bit of a period where we were working on it, not quite in the background, but definitely on the side. And during that time, we did lots of research and development. We talked to enormous amounts of students and employers, and we just understood what was going on for people when they tried to figure out what work was a good fit for them. How did they discover it? What were the pain points? What were the opportunities? And then eventually in mid to late 2017, we launched an MVP. And it was really simple with just there was 4 of us, myself, Chaz, Georgie, who was running design, and Seth, who was an engineer, actually came from Prismatik. Seth, he was an amazingly smart and talented engineer. spun up an MVP, and then we were kind of off and away from there.
Yeah, no, it's I was going to say, guys, if you can't get to the Himalayas, you could probably go to the Blue Mountains and then come back to the Sydney Startup Hub, and then think about what you want to do.
I was in the Blue Mountains last weekend. Lots of great treks. In the
Lots of great
Blue
treks. If you're in that moment yourself,
Yeah.
don't need to go to the Himalayas.
Yeah,
and the Sydney Startup Hub is the hub of the ecosystem. So.
Nice plug, Christie.
Yeah.
Smashed it.
And guys, by the way, if you have questions, slido.com. So if you want to type up some questions, because we're going to have some time for that. Okay, so let me see, where are we? So Hatch, yes. Okay, so you've spun up the MVP, started building the team. Did you raise capital for this business?
Yeah, we did. So we didn't think about raising capital for the first R&D period. We only started thinking about it when we got to the MVP point of, okay, we feel like we have a model that we have enough confidence on from testing it out by talking to a lot of people, and we're ready to start building it. And we thought long and hard about how we wanted to raise capital. Yeah. And in the end, what we decided to do was to really focus on private investors, angel investors. And the reason we did that was we were deliberately creating a business from a position of impact. Mm-hmm. Our goal wasn't to flip it, still isn't to flip it in a particular time horizon. It's not to give our investors a reliable return within a particular time horizon. Our goal is to build a long-term business that achieves the impact we want to see, which is helping people find meaning in work, and in particular helping them discover new types of work that is a great fit for them, in particular young people. And we want to build a multi-billion-dollar company that's global, and we want to get there. We don't want to sort of worry about whether we get there in a 4-year horizon or a 5-year horizon or a 10-year horizon. We are committed to get there, and so we felt that that partnering with private investors gave us the partners who had a similar mindset. They believed in that vision, they backed us. They were keen to support the business, and they weren't constrained by portfolio requirements around particular criteria or return horizons.
Because there can be drawbacks to that, right? Yeah, like
Absolutely.
In terms of, depending on what it is that you're wanting to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having said that, at the Iconic, most of the money, I think all the money came from institutional investors, mostly VCs.
Yeah.
And that was fantastic for that business. It gave the Iconic the capital it needed in the time frame it needed to win market leadership very quickly and grow from there. I often talk about the Iconic's market entry strategy like a bulldozer strategy. It was hard, it was fast. The investment thesis was the window of opportunity is open now. We're going to go through it.
Is that just because it's just an easier entry for people to get in terms of competitors?
I think it was a timing thing.
Yeah, okay.
It was clear that e-commerce was ready in Australia. ASOS was doing great, shipping all the way from the UK. Boohoo, Nasty Gal, they're doing great, shipping from the UK and from the States. It was clear that the time was ready for an Australian player to do well. And someone was going to do it. Yeah. So the bulldozer made sense to sort of take advantage of that timing opportunity. Yeah. In contrast, Hatch's market entry strategy and, in a sense, raising strategy has been more like a surgeon's knife. We are designing a completely new business model to connect young people to work opportunity through a platform that matches them with a matching algorithm. Yeah. There's lots to learn about how that model works. We didn't want to overinvest down a path if it ended up being the wrong one. And so we've been really careful in rolling it out in sort of almost like micro steps. Yeah. And that suited more private investors than it did venture capitalists. There's a good chance in the future in a larger capital raising round, we may work with VCs. Yeah. But at least we've done 2 fundraising rounds so far, an angel round and a seed round. Yep. And for both of them, it made sense to partner with private investors.
Yeah, cool. It's super interesting. Completely 2 different approaches there with both your businesses.
It's a good point. I might make a point on that.
Yeah,
one, Chrissy,
go.
Which is something that at least I'm often asked by people who are interested in starting businesses or being an entrepreneur. By the way, the reason I don't call myself an entrepreneur, I feel like I should explain that, is I feel like the problem with the label entrepreneur is it makes it sound like an end in itself. Like it's good to be an entrepreneur just for the sake of being an entrepreneur. Like innovation is good just for the sake of being innovative. And my view is it's only good if you're trying to solve a problem that you care about.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be an entrepreneur to solve a problem, and you don't have to innovate to solve a problem. You just got to solve it. You know, you could solve it working within a business. You could solve it in a non-profit. You could solve it in a new way. You could solve it in an existing way. That what matters is that you actually solve the problem.
Solve the problem, yeah.
Which is why I'm a bit sort of like allergically.
So you could say you're just a problem solver. That's all. That's your title.
I'll take that. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Adam Jacobson. I'm a problem solver.
I'll put it on my LinkedIn.
Do it.
You can endorse me for it.
I'll be the first one. I'll tick.
But a lot of people. There's someone in our team who has put on his LinkedIn general awesomeness.
Yeah.
And I think like 20 people have endorsed him for general awesomeness, which says something about LinkedIn endorsements. Put that to the side. I think like a lot of people say, well, like I'm thinking about starting a business. Can you tell me how you did it so I can learn from it? And often my response is I can, but just be aware that there's no blueprint that you should follow. Like I have a bunch of friends who are successful entrepreneurs, and each of them have done things in an entirely different way.
Yeah.
Like one of my closest mates from childhood, Ben Kieran, is like one of Australia's most successful entrepreneurs in the States. He's got an incredibly cool business called Caffeine. And before that had one he sold to Apple, didn't go to uni, like went straight into starting businesses when he was young, like raised money in a totally different way to I did. Like there's just no one way to do it, right? It's the way that makes sense for you, who you are, like your strengths and the situation that's in front of you.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to know. It's kind of why like I tend not to read business books or startup books.
Yeah.
Instead, I read like fiction because it like sort of expands your imagination as opposed to like, here's the 7 steps some person took to build some business that has nothing to do with your business. Yeah,
that's so true. It's not one size fits all. Mm-hmm. A little bit more on Hatch before we've got a couple of questions there. You recently, COVID hit. So how did that change Hatch and what the approach that you were taking in the market?
Yeah, it was like a really big moment for us. So March this year, we were just about to launch Hatch out of beta. So we'd been in MVP for 1 year, small and scrappy, beta for 1 year, bit more organized, bit bigger with more customers. By that point, we'd had about 15,000 young people use the platform, being placed in about 50 different companies. But we weren't really marketing it yet, and we were ready to say, okay, we're going to take it to market. And we hired a marketing team, we hired a customer success team. We were at the final stages of appointing a PR and media partner. Like it was all the plans were coming together. And then COVID happened. And as you might imagine, as a result of COVID, not many people are hiring like interns and grads into their business right now. And we were placing interns and grads. That's what Hatch was doing in our model up until that point. So the first thing we did, so we knew it was going to have a huge impact on us. And we were a bit worried about the runway, our funding runway. So the first thing we did was we thought about our team's health. And that's sincere. It's not. I'm not just saying that because our team might be watching right now. But genuinely, the first thing that Chaz and I did was say, okay, we'll worry about strategy in a second. What is the right thing for us to do for our team? And even though we had just moved to this beautiful new office that we were all really excited about, we felt the right thing to do was to close it immediately. This was this was probably 2 or 3 weeks ahead of when the government started putting lockdown measures in place. Yeah. But we wanted to play it really safe, so we got the whole team together. We did a really big workshop on, right, we're about to go fully remote. How do we want to communicate? How do we make this work? And then bam, next day, fully remote. There was probably 3 or 4 people who were brand new. We'd never been fully remote before, so it was a big overnight shift for us. And then the following day, we started turning our minds to strategy. And fortunately for me, I had on the last day in our office, I had a coffee scheduled with one of our investors. And she is an immensely wise and experienced person in the tech ecosystem, Alison Deans. She founded eBay in Australia. She's on the board of a lot of large Australian companies. She's wonderful. Yeah. And she said, I said to her, look, Alison, we're trying to figure out how we respond to this. Obviously, it's really going to throw our strategy out the window, and we need to figure it out fast because we're on a clock. We're on a funding clock. And she said, look, Adam, there's really only one thing you need to do. Tomorrow, call up 10 of your closest customers and just listen to what's going on for them, figure out their problems right now and what they need to do during COVID, and see if there's some way you can help. And so the next day was a Wednesday. I did that, and I caught up, like our customers are large Australian employers like Qantas and Westpac and JP Morgan and Woolworths and others. And so I called 10 of them. And by the 5th call, it was really clear that there was one big thing, which was labour dislocation. There was a lot of organisations like Qantas that would need to stand down the majority of their workforce due to COVID. And there were other organisations like Woolworths who needed to very quickly hire a lot of people to handle new demand, a lot of e-commerce demand, in fact. It was actually Woolworths. It was David from Woolies X's people and culture team who said to me, you know what? Here's a random thought. Like the technology you've developed to match young people to jobs, which looks at their transferable strengths and their motivators and their values. So we don't look at someone's CV or their grades or their, on paper self. We look at who they really are and their strengths and what kind of work they might be fit for. He said that technology that matches students to jobs, like could that be used to match stood down workers to jobs, right? Because it's kind of the same scenario. A Virgin or a Qantas pilot can't be a pilot right now, he's out of work or she's out of work. Like what other kind of work might they be a good fit for? So that idea came out of those customer calls. By the 8th or the 9th call, it was really clear that it was like what everybody needed. About midnight that night, after having dinner with my partner Ryan, she just had a new job and we were celebrating, and I spent the whole time over dinner talking about this idea. I feel really bad in hindsight about it. But about midnight that night, after talking it through all night, I drafted a LinkedIn post because I wanted to get some validation saying, here's our idea. If more than 1,000 people need it, we're going to build it within a week. I set an early alarm and woke up at like 6 a.m. and posted it because I wanted to give it the full day to see how many people needed it. And by the end of that day, thousands of people had said, yes, like we need this. We need a way to move people within the Australian economy from impacted sectors to in-demand sectors. And so then we got the team together, and they were just like amazing about it. They acknowledged it was a big sort of challenge for us to try and put this together within 7 days, repurpose our tech to redeploy stood down workers. They were up for the challenge. They came around it collaboratively. We worked in this super fast way to quickly spin together this product. And within 7 days, we launched what we call the Hatch Exchange, which is a labour exchange now for about 200 businesses to redeploy workers between them. And that's sort of how we sort of did a little mini pivot during COVID.
Which a lot of people would have had to do, very similar.
But it's a good point because like at the time, like we were talking to a lot of our peers in startups and they were doing the opposite. Like their immediate response was, the first thing we're going to do is cut costs. We're going to halve our team. We're going to give up our lease. We're going to try and find a way to like minimize our runway. That is the conventional wisdom. If anyone's like read the Black Swan article from, I think it's Sequoia who published it, like that is the conventional wisdom in a recession. Our instinctive response was actually like, before we do that, like where might there be opportunity to help? And what happened in the end was we generated more revenue within the first month of the labour exchange than we had done in our entire company history to that point. And we ended up having to hire like 20% more people to facilitate the demand.
There's a good lesson. We have a couple of questions. I don't know how much time we've got left. Sorry, guys. I've been talking. We could talk all day.
It's my fault.
But it's super interesting. Okay, so regarding Hatch, what are the most popular jobs for students from a business perspective and from a student perspective?
So it's really clear that there is a transformation going on towards what people generally call the digital economy. I often actually talk about it as a digital value chain. It's the chain of jobs required to deliver a digital business model. And what I mean by that is they're not always tech jobs, right? So if you're let's say if you're Woolworths and you're selling a lot more online, people are ordering their groceries online, not only do you need to build your digital and technology team, you also need to start building your fulfillment center operations for online. You need to build your customer contact center. You need to build your payments platform expertise. There's lots of associated business models, cybersecurity, data governance, all sorts of associated. So that digital value chain is really where there's big demand right now.
Yeah.
We see there being demand for young people in digital marketing, in software engineering, in data and analytics, in operations of customer contact centers, right across that value chain. And we also see a lot of students becoming more and more interested in that space.
Yeah.
But the other thing I'd say, that's probably more from the employer lens.
Yeah.
What I'd say from a student lens and talking to young people is, this is sort of a well-known cliche, but more often than not, young people are looking for a connection to something that they get authentically excited about. They don't just want to join a brand for the sake of it. They want to do something they believe in.
Yeah.
And so they're scrutinizing businesses and brands missions to a level that I think previous generations haven't done. And they're asking the hard questions around how that organization is positively contributing to their communities and to the world. And they're making decisions on who to join based on what they find out. And I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, totally. And what can employers do then in order to be able to attract these students?
I think the cool thing about being an employer in today's world is increasingly what you find is there are teams doing amazing work in employers that you might not have expected to be doing that work. If you look, let me think about government right now. We've been working a bit with government through our COVID-19 labour exchange, and some of the work that government teams are doing are phenomenal. The way they reinvent service provision, the way they think about scaling up massive operations to support Australians during this time. And so I think there's a real opportunity for employers to share more around what their teams are doing and sort of debunk some of the myths of all Westpac is a bank, and from a young person's perspective, that's what they do. And so no, actually, they're a technology company too. They're developing apps. They're a payments platform. They're a supporter of small businesses. They're a communications platform. They do all these other really important things too.
Yeah. Okay, question. So you recently posted something on LinkedIn about finding big problems with how hiring works. Anything interesting to share about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So something we've been thinking about is, what did we learn from that labour exchange initiative I was talking to, and where does Hatch go next, right? Because up until COVID-19, we've been really focused on placing uni students and grads into jobs. What we did through COVID-19 is place people of all ages into jobs based on their transferable strengths. So the question for us has been, all right, where to next?
Yeah.
And to try and answer that question, we've been talking to a lot of employers and understanding what they need. And what we hear from them is that more than ever before, employers need the right people in their teams to rebuild through the post-COVID period. They need people who are versatile, who have adaptive strengths, who are motivated by the company's mission, who are geared to sort of succeed in the digital economy. They need to hire the right people. But hiring is difficult. They often spend hours sifting through CVs. It's hard to get the right information through an interview process to know who to hire. It's sometimes hard to find the right people in the first place and attract them to your brand. Yeah. And so we did a big research piece. We talked about 100 companies to understand what was going on for them, and they were the themes that we found. We need great people, particularly for the digital economy. Young people are going to be really important because they've got the skills that help us rebuild, but it's a hard process to find the right ones. So what we're doing with Hatch is we are opening it up beyond just uni students and graduates to young professionals as well, anyone who might fill a junior or a mid-level role. And we're making it really easier for employers to get a short list of people who are super well matched based on our technology. We match people based on transferable strengths and motivations. So they don't have to sift through all those CVs, and they don't have to sort of worry if they're looking at the right person. They get confidence they're attracting and looking at the right people.
Yeah.
To that question about hiring problems, we're going to try and help organisations and teams overcome those hiring problems and find the right young and emerging talent for them.
Sounds like you're doing some pretty important work, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we could keep talking forever. I've got so many questions, but we have to stop. So thank you so much for your time and for your insights and for your time today.
Thanks, Christie.
It's been really great chatting with you. And just want to thank Prismatik for hosting this Local Innovator Series, and obviously City of Sydney supporting this series, as well as all the businesses in the City of Sydney, and also for Laneway Education for hosting us here today. I hope you've all enjoyed the chat and enjoyed the replay, and thanks for joining us.